So I've been wondering something from the moment I saw Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy making this dramatic speech.
Please hear me. War crimes must be punished. Deported people must come back home, and the occupier must return to their own land.
That's at this year's UN General Assembly in New York. And I wondered, how safe is that? I mean, this is admittedly a very grim thought, but a very real security concern. What's stopping someone from just, like, poisoning his tea, or lacing a door handle he touches with some kind of toxic nerve agent, or just shooting him? Dark, I know.
Once you open up that particular Pandora's box, I don't think it ever closes. And honestly, I think that's the end of international diplomacy.
And yes, I know there is security, of course, but this is also a man that we are led to believe Russia wants dead.
За наявною у нас інформацією, ворог позначив мене як ціль номер 1.
The day after the Russian invasion began, Zelenskyy reportedly told European leaders on a call, "This might be the last time you see me alive."
The most emotional moment today was President Zelenskyy. He told us he doesn't know if he will be able to take and to speak with us another time. So it's tough.
His own advisor, Mikhail Podolyak, claimed there had been at least a dozen attempts on Zelenskyy's life by Russian sabotage and intelligence teams in just the first few weeks of the war. Zelenskyy spent the first 10 months of Russia's invasion appearing by video from his bunker.
Тут я живу.
Оце є ліжко президента, і тут ви 24-го, 25-го.
Так. Так, ну і ми спускались ще в бомбосховище.
His trips abroad are often planned and shrouded in secrecy, safety concerns always top of mind. And in March, after an attack on Russian soil, at least one Russian lawmaker openly called for his head, demanding the immediate elimination of Zelenskyy. So here we have the Ukrainian president appearing for the first time since the war began in plain sight at a meeting of more than 140 world leaders, one of the most global forums on the planet, in the company of a country with a track record of assassination operations. What's stopping Russia from just knocking him off?
The area around the UN, this is First Avenue in New York, blocked off and extremely tight security.
Every September, the UN General Assembly turns several blocks of New York City into an impenetrable stronghold.
You can see they have the barricades already set up, and let me tell you, security, it is already tight.
And let me tell you, it drives New Yorkers insane.
Crazy. People don't know where to go. They're running through red lights. Like I almost got hit on a few minutes ago on 2nd Avenue.
These streets are all closed, so we live on First, and so there's no like calling an Uber, getting the bus. That's definitely like a transportation hazard. Traffic
grinds to a halt. Police armed with automatic weapons are everywhere.
Every aspect of our department will be involved, from patrol officers, detective bureau, to special operations, including aviation, harbor patrol, emergency service, K9 and more.
And it's more than just NYPD. It's state police, it's U.S. Coast Guard.
Our special agents and mission support teams have been surveying locations, working with our partners in public safety, and coordinating extensive logistics and security plans.
And there are federal agents, right up to the president's own Secret Service, involved in safeguarding every dignitary who attends.
The Diplomatic Security Service, known as DSS, is part of the U.S. State Department. Its eyes and ears are covering the city.
This is Felix. Radio check over.
The command center monitors the agents driving around the city.
All of these situations where you see that there are marks, housing for personnel that we may be protecting, or sites that we know that they're going to be visiting during the time that they're here.
Snipers, security bollards, screening checkpoints, bomb sweeps, constant surveillance. The UN itself also has a heavy security and planning detail, working many months in advance. Nothing is left to chance. Chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear protective measures, mass evacuation by land and sea, and drone countermeasures are considered in the run-up to the assembly. Tabletop exercises, joint drills. You know, this is considered UN security's annual Super Bowl event. And don't forget, every leader travels with their own security team as well. And Zelenskyy knows he's putting himself at risk every time he leaves his bunker.
Waltzing into the United Nations with a gun is not quite as easy as people might think. So is the risk zero? No, the risk was not zero. Did he believe that it was imperative for him to be there to lay out the case for Ukraine? Absolutely.
So one reason you can't just off a foreign leader, good luck trying. If security doesn't stop you, the idea is that the consequences would.
Killing him at the United Nations would be an unprecedented act that I think would finally break international diplomacy altogether. I think it would turn so many countries against Russia who rely upon the fact that their leaders can go to an environment like New York in the United Nations and have dialogue.
It's worth noting there has never been an assassination attempt at the UN General Assembly. It's considered international diplomatic territory, a place that, is supposed to transcend national boundaries, political ideology, cultural differences. Any kind of violence traced back to any one country would likely immediately isolate it from the rest of the world.
I think Russia's interests would just absolutely die on the vine. Everything short of a blockade. I think there would be a cutoff of international trade. I think there'd be a cutoff in monetary exchange, energy supplies. I think it would mean that Russia would probably be down to Iran and North Korea and maybe Belarus total in the world in terms of trade, travel, anything.
Also, consider the reason Zelenskyy was at the UN at all, giving a warning to the world. Forget us at your own peril.
And this is clearly a genocide. When hatred is weaponized against one nation, it never stops there.
Ukraine is trying, eternally trying, to force other countries to draw a hard line in the sand against Russia.
Many seats in the General Assembly Hall may become empty. Empty if Russia succeeds with its treachery and aggression.
A brazen attempt on the life of a foreign leader would give the international community every reason to unite against a country that would dare cross a red line no country has ever crossed.
It might just turn them into a pariah that would, that would make North Korea look open and welcome around the world in comparison.
Ukraine believes Russia had a simple plan at the outset of the war. Destroy Ukraine by destroying its leader. Create panic. Destabilize the country enough to win a quick, decisive victory. But the calculus has changed.
A senior NATO intelligence official telling us that if we are not already in a stalemate in the war in Ukraine, we are rapidly approaching one.
I think the early part of the war that was Russia's 100% focus was the capture or killing of Zelenskyy. And, that was why they had the mad dash on Kiev. That's why they tried to land at Hostomel Airport, was the thought that they could decapitate the Ukrainian state and then the military would surrender instantly.
There is no quick, decisive victory to be had here. And, what would assassination accomplish? A paper at the National Bureau of Economic Research looked at 298 assassination attempts on world leaders over the last 150 years. 59 were successful. They analyzed outcomes, compared them to those situations where assassinations failed, and came up with an interesting conclusion. We find that assassinations of autocrats produce substantial changes in the country's institutions, while assassinations of democrats do not. Translation: if you kill a leader like Zelenskyy, there is a natural succession plan built into the structure of government. When democratic leaders die, there's a clear chain of command, no vacuum of power.
You can get rid of Zelenskyy, but he's not irreplaceable. Whoever might think that getting rid of Zelenskyy will somehow end the war or will get Ukrainians come to the table, I think is mistaken.
And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken confirmed to CBS News last year that Ukraine does, in fact, have a plan in place if Zelenskyy were to be killed. But one more thing worth thinking about.
I think even the Russians have to realize by now, even Vladimir Putin personally understands by now that the Ukrainian state is against him, and it's not just Zelenskyy.
There is no doubt a psychological trauma inflicted when the leader of a country is violently removed. But any would-be assassin, and those giving them their orders, would have to seriously consider to what extent a victim becomes a martyr. Could death turn a man into a beacon?
Тут наші військові, тут громадяни суспільства, тут всі ми тут захищаємо нашу незалежність, нашу державу. І так буде й далі. Слава нашим захисникам, слава нашим захисницям. Слава Україні!
His assassination would make him a martyr not just in Ukraine, but I think in many places around the world, because again, that resentment against Russia, if it were to cross that kind of boundary, would be endless.
As time goes on, Zelenskyy has become bolder in his international travels and appearances. He's made dozens of foreign trips now since the war, and he's planning to visit Ottawa and Toronto this week. So, turns out, given everything that's happened in the last 19 months of the war, being in plain sight on an international platform with millions of people watching, that may be the safest place in the world to be.